Our session today is on how to build winning relationships. I'm going to share a story with you to get the session started, which is the ideal way to destroy relationships. It's one of those bad example kind of things that people learn from. Like the lady who went to see the school teacher about little Johnny. She said, now if little Johnny gets out of line in any way, what you do is you slap the child next to him and Johnny will get the message. Now, that's not exactly the way to endear yourself to anybody. But Mr. B is a little different story. Mr. B called a meeting, had all of his people together, and he said, now, this is a great company we have here. It can be even greater. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start assuming more of a leadership role by setting the correct example. I'm going to start coming in early. I'll start taking reasonable lunch hours. I will stay until the office is closed. In short, I'm going to be the role model that you need to follow. Oh, it was a wonderful speech. But you know sometimes how those speeches go. After a period of time, you kind of forget all about it. The excitement and enthusiasm dies down just a little bit, and that's exactly what happened. Mr. B was out for lunch one day, and he forgot about the time. Suddenly, he looked at his watch, and he thought to himself, oh boy, I'm supposed to be back to the office in 10 minutes. He hopped up, ran out to the parking lot, hopped in his automobile, scratched off, burned rubber, doing about 90 miles an hour down the freeway, and the long arm of the law entered the picture, gave him a ticket. Now, you're talking about somebody who was furious. Mr. B was absolutely furious. He said, this is absolutely ridiculous. Here I am, a peaceful, tax-paying, law-abiding citizen, minding my own business. Maybe I was going a little too fast, but they ought to be out here looking for robbers and murderers and really the bad guys. Leave us peaceful, tax-paying, law-abiding citizens alone. Oh, he was really upset. When he got back to the office, it was about 45 minutes late. And he did what some people have always done when they get their hand caught in the cookie jar, so to speak. They point yonder so nobody will look at them. In a loud voice, he called for a sales manager. He said, come on in here. I want to talk to you about the Armstrong account. All I want to know is a simple yes or no. Did you make the sale or did you miss the sale? And the sales manager said, Mr. B, I hate to tell you this. I thought it was a done deal. I thought we had it signed, sealed, and delivered. But at the last moment, something happened. It came unglued. No, I did not get the sale. Now, if you think Mr. B was upset before, you should have seen him now. He just hit the ceiling. He said, this is really something. Here we had a chance to get this big account. We desperately needed that money to expand our product line, and I've been depending on you as my sales manager. You've been here 15 years, and you have a chance to really make a mark, and what do? You blow it. Well, let me tell you something. Just because you've been here 15 years does not mean that you've got a lifetime contract. Now, you're going to replace that business, or I'm going to replace you. You're talking about upset. Mr. B was furious. But if you think he was upset, you should have seen the sales manager. He walked out of the room, slammed the door behind him, muttering under his breath, this is really something. For 15 years I've been running this company. If it had not been for me, we would have gone broke years and years ago. And here, just because I missed one sale, he uses a cheap, lousy trick threatening to fire me. This is not fair. Oh, he was upset. Called his secretary in. He said, you remember those 5 letters I gave you to get out this morning? Have you gotten them out? Or are you going to give me some lousy excuse for not having them out? And she said, well, no. Don't you remember? You told me that the Hilliard account took precedence over everything else. That's what I've been working on. If you think the sales manager was upset before, you should have seen him now. He just hit the ceiling. He said, you've been here 8 years, and you apparently think you've got lifetime security. Well, I want to tell you something. You get those letters out, and if you don't get them out, I'll get me somebody who can. Oh, he was really upset. But if you think he is upset, you should have seen that secretary. She goes storming out that room. She slams the door behind her. She said, this is ridiculous. 8 years I've been here. Just because I cannot do 2 things at once, all of a sudden he gets upset with me, threatening to fire me. And I'm the only one who knows what's going on around here. Hadn't been for me, this company would have gone under years and years ago. And as far as him firing me, as much as I know about him, who does He think he's kidding. Oh, she was upset. She went out to the switchboard operator's desk. She said, I got 5 letters. I want you to get them out. Now, I know ordinarily this is not your job, but you don't do anything anyhow but sit around out here, occasionally answer the telephone. I want these letters out, and I want them out today. And if you can't get them out today, let me know. I'll get somebody who can. Oh, she was upset. But if you think she was upset, you should have seen the switchboard operator. She about hit the ceiling. This is ridiculous. I am the only one around here who does anything, who understands what's going on. They don't do anything in the back but gossip, drink coffee, every once in a while do a little work. The minute they get behind, they come out here, they put it on my desk, and they say, now if you don't get it done, we're going to fire you. And I'm the only one that understands the operation. Hadn't been for me, this company would have gone under years and years ago. Oh, she was upset. But she got the workout. She got home, walked in the front door, slammed it behind her. First thing she saw was her 12-year-old son laying there on the floor watching television. Second thing she saw was a great big rip right across his trouser leg. She said, son, how many times have I told you, when you come home from school, put your play clothes on. Mother has a hard enough time as it is supporting you and paying your expenses and getting you through school. I've told you to do it before, and because you have disobeyed me, you're going to go upstairs. Right now, there's going to be no dinner for you this evening, and there's going to be no television for the next 3 weeks. Oh, she was really upset. But if you think she was upset, you should have seen that 12-year-old boy. He hopped up, running out of his room, muttering under his breath. It was an accident. Could have happened to anybody. I was doing something for my own mother. She doesn't even give me a chance to explain. Oh, he was really upset. And about that time, his tomcat walked right in front of him, which was a mistake. The boy reaches down, he gives the tomcat a big old boost, and he said, you get out of here. You're probably up to some no good yourself. Now let me ask you a question. Would it have been so much better if Mr. B had just gone directly from his lunch to the switchboard operator's house and kicked that cat himself? He left all of those other people out of the deal. Now, here's the question I've got for you. Whose cat have you been kicking recently? Here's another question. Have you been letting anybody else kick your cat? Were you ever in a traffic situation? There's a mile of cars in front of you and a mile of cars behind you, and some idiot right behind you sits on his horn. Do you turn around and say, can't you see we got all those cars up front? What's the matter with you? Do you understand that it really has nothing to do with you? Somebody has been kicking his cat earlier. Have you ever been in a restaurant? All you want's a cup of coffee? And you sit there, and you sit there, and you sit there. And finally a waiter or waitress comes by, and you timidly hold up your hand and say, could I have a cup of coffee, please? And they proceed to take your head off. Can't you see I'm busy? I'll get to you when I have a time to do so. It seems that everybody thinks all I got to do is wait on them. Do you get upset and say, well, you don't have to bite my head off about it, do you? Or can you understand it's got nothing to do with you? Somebody had been kicking that waiter or waitress's cat long before you got there. Have you ever had a magnificent day? You get home an hour and a half late. You walk in the front door whistling and singing and call out for your mate, hi, hon, how you doing? And your mate screams back at you, how come you're so late? If you'd been putting up with what I've been putting up during this day, you wouldn't be so enthusiastic and excited. Now tell me where you've been. Can you understand it's got nothing to do with you? Somebody's been kicking your mate's cat all day long. Folks, we just live in a negative cat-kicking world. So how are we going to deal with a situation like that? Well, the next time somebody proceeds to chew you out and you're innocent. Now, that's a very important word, innocent. And they're chewing you out, you know. Do you sit there seething and saying, wait till they hush, and now I'm going to unload on them? Instead of doing that, which is always dangerous, Why don't you start thinking to yourself as the individual is chewing you out? Just start quietly thinking and patting your foot. Cat, 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 cat. It's absolutely amazing what it will do to your attitude. Instead of cat kicking, which is the way to destroy relationships, what can we do to build those winning relationships? Well, the first step to building good relationships is we need to be a good finder. A number of years ago, they did a study in New York City of 100 self-made millionaires. As an aside, 85% of them came from towns of less than 15,000 people. I just found that kind of intriguing. The interesting thing is they ranged in age from about 25 to about 80. They ranged in age from educational backgrounds of something like the 5th grade to 2 or 3 of them had their PhDs. They came from every walk of life, every occupation, these 100 self-made millionaires. There was only one thing that they had in common, and that was this. They were good finders. They knew how to see the good in any situation or in any person. Let me give you a simple example. And though it involves a tragedy, it still says a great deal for the thinking of the individual. A big old 747 flying into Honolulu or flying out of Honolulu, the door came off. 7 people were sucked out and lost their lives. And in recounting the incident, the individual was talking about the horrible fact that that had happened, the tragic loss of life. And that is a tragic loss. The individual who was receiving the information said, "Boy, doesn't that prove something? How tremendously well built these airplanes are. How extraordinarily skillful the crews are. Just think, with a door missing and the airplane loaded, they were able to land it with all the passengers left aboard and safe without a scratch." That's what I'm talking about. We need to find any good in any situation, and we can do that even in a tragedy. Become a good finder. I moved to Dallas a number of years ago, and I met a man who's one of the most remarkable human beings I think I've ever met. His name is Walter Haley. He devised a new way of selling life insurance. Now, this was in the days when people primarily bought ordinary life insurance. This was in the days when a $1 million producer was considered to be a pretty stable, good producer. He was working with independent grocery warehouses, supplying groceries to the independent stores all over the country. He devised an idea and a plan whereby the independent grocermen could buy their life insurance and have it attached to that huge grocery bill they were getting every week anyhow. Well, the net result is his life insurance people were selling 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 million dollars worth of life insurance a year, dramatically more than anybody else. Well, I met Walter Haley, and we just hit it off and started chatting. He said, "Zig, I've got to take you and let you see one of these mammoth warehouses." Well, we walked in. I didn't know there was that much food in the world, much less under one roof. It was colossal. As we walked in the front door, Mr. Haley said, "Excuse me for a moment, Zig." He went over to the switchboard operator and he said, "You know, I just want to tell you what a delight it is for me to dial this number. You always answer so enthusiastically. I get the feeling that you're just there waiting for me to call." Well, the lady smiled very broadly and said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Haley. I really appreciate that comment." He walked on through the door leading into the major portion of the warehouse, and as we walked down one of the corridors, he said, "Excuse me, Zig, I haven't met this gentleman. We stepped into this little office. Walter Haley stuck his hand out and he said, "I'm Walter Haley. I know who you are, but we haven't met. I also know what you've been doing. Since you took over this department, we've not had the first complaint. I just want to tell you how pleased I am with the job you're doing." Well, the man was very pleased. He said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Haley. I do the very best I can." And Walter Haley said, "Well, that is excellent. Just keep it up." We walked upstairs. He walked into his office, and he walked over with me to his secretary, and he said, "Zig, I want you to shake hands with the greatest secretary who ever sat behind a desk. My wife thinks she hung the moon and can take it down whenever she wants to. So I'm asking you right now, please don't do it. I love the moon right where it is." Well, the secretary obviously beamed broadly and said, "Well, Mr. Haley, you sure are kind to say that, and I obviously love your wife and thank her for me too." We walked on into his private office, and there sat one of his men. And Walter Haley said to me, "Zig, shake hands with one of the greatest life insurance men to ever put on a pair of shoes." And the salesman said, "Oh, Walter, you're always saying things like that." And of course, since they're true, I obviously love hearing you say those things. Keep it up. The whole trip took about 5 minutes. But I'm here to tell you that there were 4 people who were dramatically affected that day. Now let me share something with you which is critically important, and that's this. Walter Haley is a very sincere man. He is a very observant man. The compliments were from his heart. He was not making small talk. He was communicating what he felt. When you do things like that, I can absolutely guarantee people will respond. And they will respond in a very positive way. When you talk about building relationships, there is a magnificent way to do it. It's absolutely true. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Now, what did Walter Haley want? He really wants those people to be friendly and loyal and more productive. But had he been a conniver, had he said, "Well, now I can manipulate them by bragging on them, and then they will be more productive." Let me tell you something. I'm talking about a philosophy. If you use it as a tactic, I can absolutely guarantee you it will not work. If you think you can do something for somebody else and then later they'll do something for you, that is ugly. That is manipulative. It absolutely will not work. But if you look for the good and find the good and compliment the good because it is true and because you're sincere, you will build a tremendous amount of loyalty. It's the philosophy. It is not a tactic. Be a good finder. One evening I was speaking at an insurance company banquet, and I was seated at the head table between 2 of the vice presidents. And as we sat there, the meal started. The lady brought us out our salads, and as she set it down, I simply said, "Thank you." The other 2 gentlemen on either side said nothing. In a few minutes, she brought coffee. Again, I said, "Thank you very much." The 2 gentlemen on either side said nothing. Soon she brought the entree, and I just said, "Thank you" at first. And then I said, "You know, I'm amazed at the number of people you can serve. And you never seem to be in a hurry, and you're so pleasant. I just wanted to tell you how much I'm enjoying the meal." Well, she just beamed all over, and she said, "Thank you very much." Then came dessert time. It was a chocolate sundae. Really what it was a scoop of ice cream with some chocolate syrup poured over it. I do not exaggerate when I say that the scoop of ice cream she brought me was bigger than a baseball. It was all over the little cup, you know, the little bowl they put it in, and the chocolate syrup was running down the sides. The scoop that each of these other 2 guys got, the 2 vice presidents, was about the size of a golf ball. It was so obvious that they commented on this. Said, "Well, Zig, it looks like you know this lady." And I said, "No, I've never met her before, but I know a great deal about her." They said, "Oh, what do you know about her?" I said, "The same thing I know about everybody else." There's some basics, you see. Everybody wants to be right. I can say that without fear of error. But you can't always be right. That's just not in the cards. But everybody also wants to be understood. And so if you understand the individual and work at understanding them, then you're going a long way towards building a winning relationship. The third thing is everybody wants to be appreciated. We can appreciate an individual for what they do. We can appreciate their effort, and everybody wants to be respected. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was recognizing her as a human being. I was being appreciative of what she was doing, and that is important. Yes, that's the way to build winning relationships. But you might be sitting there thinking and say, well, Zig, in a dream world where everybody is nice and everybody is honest and everybody gives their best effort, that's wonderful. But Zig, that's not the kind of world I live in. Suppose my child goofs, or suppose my staff member goofs, and they do not do the job they're capable of doing. Do I look for the good? Do I brag on them for doing a lousy job? Obviously not. If you do, you're condoning mediocrity. You're even encouraging mediocrity. But there's a way to do anything. Now, I am one of those fortunate human beings who had the privilege of being raised by a mother who was an extraordinary, wise human being. She only finished the 5th grade, but she graduated magna cum laude from the University of Life. I so well remember what a tremendous manager she was and how much common sense she had, or as my grandmother would say, how much gumption she had. Now, because of the times and because of the fact that my dad had died when I was 5 years old and there were 6 of us too young to work, my mother had to manage to get all of her children from a very early age busy contributing to the support of the family by the efforts they expended. It was in the heart of the Depression. I will remember I was milking cows before I was 8 years old. Now, I know that from time to time we'll have some city slickers watching this presentation, so let me tell you something about cows. They don't give milk. Now, I don't know what you can do with that information, but, that's not my responsibility. I'm supposed to pass it out. You use it like you see fit. We survived because of 5 milk cows in a big garden. I so vividly remember my first solo assignment in the garden. Now, as a manager, my mother had some givens that always took place. When she gave us an assignment, we knew what she expected. That was our very best. We also knew she was going to inspect to make certain she got what she expected. It's terribly discouraging for a child or for an employee to do a good job and then have nobody even recognize that it is completed, much less that the job was well done. And we knew the third thing about my mother, and that is we knew that she was going to instruct us on how to do it before we did it. So we knew what to expect. We knew she was going to inspect, and we knew that she was going to be instructing us on how to do it. Now, that's especially important for a small child or a new employee or someone in the lower realm of the totem pole. Well, my mother showed me exactly how she wanted me to hoe those beans. Then she said to me, son, when you get through, call me and let me look it over. Well, after what seemed like forever, I finally got through, and I said, Mama, I'm through. She was working in another part of the garden. My mother was a little bitty lady. She's only about 5 feet tall, weighed less than 100 pounds. She was a little stooped at that time. She always wore a little cloth sunbonnet to protect her face from that hot Mississippi sun. We could tell from as far away as we could see our mother when she was displeased. She always put her hands behind her back. She always ducked her head. She always cocked it slightly to the right, and she always gave you that little left or right that said, When my mama started that, I said, "What's the matter, Mama?" She kind of half smiled, and she said, "Well, son, it looks like you're going to have to lick this calf over." Now, is there anybody in this audience who is so underprivileged that you do not clearly understand that perfectly clear Mississippi colloquialism, lick that calf over? Anybody here doesn't understand it? Don't be embarrassed about being ignorant. There are a lot of folks that don't understand good plain communication. Well, what that meant simply was, son, you're going to have to do the job again. Well, I knew that, but I was trying to buy time. So I looked at my mama and I said, "Mama, I have not been messing with that calf. I have been hoeing these beans." Well, my mama kind of got tickled. She laughed and she said, "Well, son, let me tell you something. For most boys, the job you did was okay. But you are not most boys. You are my son. And my son can do better than this." What she did was so critically important. You see, she had criticized the performance, but she had praised the performer. Now, the performance needed criticizing, but the performer needed the praise. Now, as a small child, I do not remember being overly excited about the opportunity of doing the job over. But in retrospect, I realized that that was one of the most important lessons I learned in dealing with people and in building winning relationships. You don't build winning relationships always on a soft cushion. You build them on the hard facts of life. But you nevertheless deal gently and understandingly with those people. As we summarize what we've been talking about in building winning relationships, let me sum it up by this way. Number one, don't be a cat kicker. In other words, think it through. What kind of an impact will this have not only on the person I'm dealing with, but will that individual go down the line kicking cats and affect the productivity of everybody else? Number two, be a good finder. Now, that doesn't mean that every day of your life you make the rounds and everybody you see, you say, "That's good, that's good, that's good." That is not what I'm talking about. But periodically, without any hint of a schedule, when you catch somebody doing something that's right, be a good finder. Give them that word of encouragement. Number three, you need to criticize the performance and praise the performer. You see, if you understand an individual can do a lousy job, or an individual can do a bad thing, but that does not mean the individual is a lousy individual or a bad individual. One of the phrases I use daily, almost regardless of the subject matter I'm talking about, is let's just all remember that failure is an event. It's not a person. Yesterday ended last night. And just because an individual did not do a good job on the one thing, that really has no bearing on their value as a person. And if we can retain that value as a person in their minds, then their performance will become better and better. That's the way you build those winning relationships. Now I want to close it with a story which I think says an awful lot. It's a love story. But it's a different kind of a love story. I love to play golf. I don't believe there's a living, breathing human being on the face of this earth who loves the game as good as I do. Now, there are a lot of people that play it lots better, but nobody has as much fun as I do. I love to get out there. Don't get to get out there often. So when I do, I like to tee that little sucker up so I can get at it. Now, I rear back, and when I go out there, I get after it. Boom! home, and if I can find it, I hit that sucker again. Well, anyhow, I learned a long time ago that a fast game of golf and a slow game of golf both require about 5 hours. And when you travel as I do, I'm not about to come home and kiss the redhead. The redhead is my wife of all of these years, and my son goodbye and head for the golf course. I mention my son because he came 10 years after our youngest daughter, and when they were coming up, golf really wasn't in the game or in the cards for me to any degree. But after my travels, I didn't want to come home and leave my family, but I love to play golf. So I came up with a brilliant idea, if I do say so myself. Bought my wife and my son a set of golf clubs, and everybody was excited about it, except my wife and my son. But they went along with me for about 5 games. End of the 5th game, the redhead said, honey, I just don't like to play golf. Instead of when I talk about my wife, I always call her the redhead. When I'm talking to her, it's Sugar Baby, and her name is Jean. The redhead said, honey, I just don't like to play golf. Said it's too hot or too cold or too wet or too dry or too windy or whatever. Count me out, but you and Tom keep playing. You love it and you need that time with him. Well, I went golf buddy number 1. End of the summer, my boy said, Dad, I don't hardly know how to tell you this, because I know how good you like to play golf, and I know how good you like to be with me. But Dad, golf is just not my game. I said, just count me out. Now, Dad, I'll wrestle with you. I'll run with you. I'll ride the bicycle with you. I'll play catch with you. I'll do any of those things, Dad, but golf, that's not my game. Count me out. There went golf buddy number 2. Well, for the next 3 or 4 years, there wasn't much golf in my life. And then one night, we were out to dinner. My sticks were in the trunk of the car. We were on the way back home. We passed a driving range. My boy suddenly said, Dad, let's stop and hit a few. Well, my boy is a smooth talker. So we stopped to hit a few. We were banging away, and he said, Dad, let me borrow one of your woods. So I handed my son my 4-wood, and he choked up on a little bit. He reared back. He let the string out. He busted that sucker about 40 yards further than he had ever hit a golf ball before. I'll tell you, he turned around grinning like you've never seen before. Biggest smile I'd ever seen on my son's face until 2 days later. When I saw that grin that night, though, I knew I had me a golfing buddy. A couple of days later, we were out on the course. We were on a par 4. I gave my son the 4-wood, and again, he choked up, he reared back. He poleaxed that sucker right down the middle, had a little draw on it, hit the ground running like a scared rabbit, stopped dead center, right in the middle of the fairway. Perfect position. We get down to the ball, he takes his 5-iron out, and just like you see him do it on television, he kept his head down, he smooth stroked that sucker, it took off, it got right over the green, it landed just as soft as a feather, about 30 feet from the pin. He's hunting his bird. Now, if you don't know anything about golf, that means that if he sinks the putt, he's 1 under par on this hole. If you don't know what that means, it means he done good. So I showed my boy how to line the putt. I showed him how to stroke it. And the minute he stroked that putt, I knew it was in the hole. But when that ball hit the bottom of that cup, that boy jumped straight up about 6 feet. Still beat me to the ground by 5 seconds, I'll tell you. You're talking about excitement. Man, I was excited. I grabbed my boy and hugged him. We did a victory dance there for a couple of minutes. Then all of a sudden I realized I was in trouble. See, I was on the green in 2 also. I was only about 10 feet from the cup. I was hunting my bird. I knew that if I missed my putt, my boy would think I'd done it on purpose so he could win. That would have given him a cheap victory, which is quite a loss. So I determined that I was going to do the very best I could, so that if I did miss, then I could honestly say, congratulations, son, you've won it fair and square. Well, my best effort always includes a little providential help, which I believe is perfectly legitimate. even on the golf course, maybe especially on the golf course. Well, anyhow, I line the putt as well as I know how to line a putt. I stroked it as well as I've ever stroked a putt in my life, and just like it had eyes, it went straight to the bottom of the cup. Before I reached down to pick it up, I looked at my son and I said, "Now tell me the truth, boy. Were you pulling for Dad?" I think you know what it would have meant to my son had I missed the putt. He was 11 years old. He had never beaten me a hole of golf. It would have meant a great deal to him. Yet quietly and yet very firmly, without any hesitation, my boy looked me right in the eye and said, "Dad, I always pull for you." That, ladies and gentlemen, is love. That's pure love. That's what we need in every home on this entire globe. It's what we need between the parent and the child. It's what we need between the educator and the student. It's what we need between the employer and the employee. It's what we need between the sales and marketing person and the person they're trying to persuade to take action. You see, if you really have that feeling where you're pulling for the other person, if you believe in what you're doing so strongly that you can pull for the other person to buy for their benefit, at that instant you become infinitely more persuasive, infinitely more professional, infinitely more productive. If as a manager you can get so concerned about your people where your feeling is you're pulling for them to do their best for their benefit, that's communicated. You see, it is so true. A wise person said it long ago. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. That's the essence of building winning relationships. By these ideas, this concept, these philosophies, follow through on them. Put them into practice on a daily basis. Because if you do, I can close this session as I close all sessions by saying, if you'll do these things, I'll see you. And yes, I really do mean you at the top.